Today's lesson on generosity continues our series on the fruits of the Spirit. It comes out of Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 10. Give generously and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and everything you put your hand to. I remember many years ago, I went to General Assembly, which is a national gathering of our denomination. It was in downtown Detroit, so I knew the area very well. And one day the meal that was being provided there wasn't too appealing. So I decided that that was the day I would go to Woodward Coney Island, which is a famous, diner in downtown Detroit. They've been there for decades. It was always full, especially at lunchtime. And I got there and there was a homeless man outside. And as I passed by, he said, "Can you give me some money for lunch?" And I thought, well, I really can't do that, but I would love to buy you lunch. And he said, that would be great. So what happened was we went in, and then immediately I realized that he was no stranger to the staff there. In fact, all of the waitresses said, "Well, hello, Alex. How you doing, honey? It's good to see you today. How are things going?" And he would reply, "Oh, things are great." And he would answer every waitress by name. And the owner said, "Well, hey, Alex, it's good to see you today. Glad that you're here. Who's your friend?" And he said, "Well, this is my friend Todd. I just met him outside." And I realized that I was the guest. That I may have invited him to lunch, but he had invited me into his banquet hall. And it was clear that everybody in there loved him. And so we sat down, and I said, "What do you want to eat?" And he said, "I'd like a cheeseburger and fries and a Coke, please." And I said, "Only one?" He said, "One is plenty." And so I bought him a cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke, and we ate for a little while. And then I looked at him and I said, "Alex, tell me your story." And he said, "Well, I'd be happy to." He said, "Believe it or not too long ago, I was an executive at a window company." He said, "I made close to $200,000 a year." He said, "I had a nice house, beautiful car, beautiful wife, a daughter, a grandchild, and everything going." He said, "I was highly productive." He said, "But I didn't know that I had a mental illness." He said, "I could stay productive for months at a time, and I could do so, for a year or two at a time." And he said, then I would suffer, a depression. And he said that would come about every, 2 or 3 years. And, they were never very serious at first. And they got a little bit more serious as I got older. And then one of these times I had this depression. He said it was deep and I was suicidal. And, my brain, it never recovered. He said, "I lost my ability to think critically. I lost my ability to problem solve. I couldn't sleep. I was suicidal." He said, "My life was falling apart." He said, "I lost my job. I lost my house. I lost my car. I lost my wife." He said, "I was in bad shape. I was institutionalized for a while, and then when I got out, my daughter said, 'Dad, why don't you come up here and live with us in Grand Rapids?' And so I went over to the west of the state. I lived with my daughter, but it wasn't home. So I figured I'd go home with what little money I had, and I'd try to find a job in which I could support myself, but eventually that money ran out, and I ended up homeless. I was on the street, and I didn't want to leave my city. He said, "So for, the past several years, I've been homeless." And I said, "Well, Alex, how do you survive? How do you get through those harsh winters, especially this past winter, which was just absolutely horrid? Lots of snow, lots of ice, lots of cold." He said, "Yeah, it was a bad winter." He said, "But most of the homeless sleep in the Riverfront Park, and the police, they ramp up security there to try and protect us. But a lot of us older guys, we get abused, we get stolen from, by the younger people. A lot of them do drugs." And he said, "But I made it through this past winter. Some of us died." He said, "But almost every night I slept in a good sleeping bag that one of the churches provide us, and 17 layers of cardboard. And he said, I made it. I made it through. And he was proud. And I said, well, are you going to continue to do this? Isn't there anything you can do? And he said, well, yeah. He said, I do have a drug that helps to manage my depression. It helps me to sleep. He said, but what I have to do is I have to go to the public health department once a day to take the medicine. And I can stay on a waiting list to get a room there. And I'm just a few weeks away. As long as I'm there every single day to get my medicine, I'll have a room and food and, a place to shower. So I make sure I'm there every day to get my medicine. I said, wow. He said, but you know what's more important to me? And I said, what's that? He said, God's given me a mission. And I said, God's given you a mission? He said, yeah. And he began to wrap up his cheeseburger. I said, well, you don't have to do that. I said, I'll buy you another one. You don't have to save it for later. And he said, no. He said, it's not for me. He said, it's for the birds at the park. And I said, the birds? And he said, yeah, the birds at the park. He said, whenever I get lunch, I wrap up half of my meal and I take it back to the park and I feed the birds, because somebody has to take care of the birds. Who's going to take care of the birds if I don't take care of the birds? Nobody down there feeds the birds. And the birds are God's creatures too. And the Bible tells us to take care of God's creatures. In fact, the Bible, he said, tells us that, he knows every sparrow, every bird that falls, and he loves them. So if God loves them, why shouldn't I? And if nobody else is taking care of them, then why shouldn't that be my job? And I was humbled. And he said, the birds sing, and it's a beautiful song. And he said, the birds are good for the earth, and he named off ways in which the birds were good for the ecosystem, good for God's creation, part of God's world. He said, the birds are beautiful, and they give people hope and peace. He said, birds are wonderful, and God's given me a mission to take care of them. And here I thought I was going to minister to this man, and he ended up ministering to me. I said, Alex, are you sure you don't want me to buy you more food? Maybe you can save it for later. He said, no, like I said, I don't take any more than I really need. And I know that Brother Joe from Fort Street Presbyterian Church, he'll be down tonight, and he'll give everybody hot dogs and some chips and a cookie and something to drink. And he gives us each a couple hot dogs. I usually eat one, and I save one for the birds. And, we parted. We shook hands. And everybody said goodbye, Alex, on the way out. Goodbye, Todd. It was nice to meet you. And my new friend and I parted. And after he left,